Good evening, I'm Ira Franco. Thanks for joining us tonight. Now, we are following breaking news tonight. We start with a live look out of Israel, where it is after 8 in the morning. The U.S. has joined the country in attacking Iran. Israel has since closed the country's airspace to both in and out flights following the attacks. President Trump confirmed the U.S. military targeted 3 Iranian nuclear sites. In a post on social media, Trump says a full payload of bombs fell on Iran's main nuclear enrichment facilities, Fordo. The president adds that all planes are safely on their way home and ends a message saying now is the time for peace. National correspondent Kayla Gaskin has a closer look from Washington.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime, Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan.
The United States striking Iran's nuclear facilities, providing offensive assistance for Israel in its war with Iran. President Trump addressing the nation from the White House directly after the strikes.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressing gratitude.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history.
The U.S. alone had the 30,000-pound bunker buster needed to destroy Iran's nuclear sites buried deep underground. President Trump didn't mention whether that was used in this attack, but did say that B-2 stealth bombers, which are capable of carrying bunker busters, were involved.
This cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
On Friday, Iran's foreign minister warning the U.S. getting involved would be very dangerous for everybody. Now, all eyes are on Iran and how they will respond. I'm Kayla Gaskins reporting.
President Trump addressed the nation following the attacks tonight. Let's take a closer look.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime, Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades.
In response to the U.S. attacks on Iran's nuclear sites, Iran's top diplomat tonight warned that the attacks would have, quote, everlasting consequences and that Tehran reserves all options to retaliate. And you are taking a look at the Iranian nuclear sites bombed by the U.S. The attack includes the Fordow facility that was built deep under a mountain to prevent its destruction. It's not yet clear how extensive the damage is to Fordow, though Trump shared a post claiming it's been destroyed. It was believed only a U.S. bunker buster bomb could touch it. And U.S. preparations to bomb the Fordow nuclear site had years of planning. That's according to a former high-ranking U.S. officials with knowledge of the plans.
You just can't leave Fordow untouched. And this operation, I know it well because we spent about 2 years refining it, making sure it's ready if a president ever needed it. I'm fairly confident it was successful.
Brian McGurk says he's spoken with a senior administration official who feels the strike was very effective. Officials say this is not an expanded campaign against Iran and only targets its nuclear program. And President Trump's order to bomb Iran comes after failed nuclear talks, multiple warnings, and ahead of his self-declared 2-week deadline for Iran to surrender. He said this on Friday.
What was the thought process behind 2-week timetable?
Just time to see whether or not people come to their senses.
Israel started its bombing campaign against Iran as talks between the U.S. and Iran dragged on. U.S. intelligence was far apart with Israel how close Iran was to developing a bomb. The president told reporters Friday that his director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was wrong in saying that Iran was not developing a weapon. And Iran has a capacity to hit U.S. assets stationed in the Middle East and has in the past, but not the United States. A Congressional Research Service report filed this week estimates Iranian missiles to have ranged throughout the Middle East all the way to Eastern Europe. The estimates do not include Iranian missiles developed since 2019. Iranian missiles have pierced Israel's anti-air defenses to an extent, but many have been destroyed by Israel and the U.S. before reaching their targets. And the question now is, how will Iran choose to respond? One former U.S. official has a pretty good idea of what to expect.
Both sent a warning to Iran not to think about that. And if they do, we would have a counter, trying to avoid going up that ladder.
And President Trump has warned Iran not to respond. The Iran Supreme Leader warned earlier this week that if the U.S. did strike, that it would be bad for the United States without providing specifics. And the world is watching how other countries and groups respond to the U.S. attacks on Iran. One of the biggest concerns, the Houthis in Yemen. That's a group the U.S. State Department has declared a terrorist organization. The Houthis are a Shia Muslim group that emerged in the southern part of Yemen in the 1990s. They began a rebellion against the Yemeni government in the early 2000s. In 2023, the Houthis started firing attacks on Israel. Most were intercepted. Last year, the U.S. and U.K. started out attacks on the Houthis after the group sank several ships in the Middle East, seized another, and killed 4 crew members. In March of this year, the U.S. officially declared the group a terrorist organization. And that same month, President Trump authorized a series of military strikes on them. The two sides reached an agreement where neither would target the other, as long as there were no attacks on their group or countries. And among the biggest concerns about any conflicts or wars in the Middle East is the effect on oil prices and the stock markets here at home. Given that it's Saturday night, we won't have a good idea of the initial effect until Monday morning. But world financial leaders are already weighing in tonight. Jamie Cox from the Harris Financial Group says oil is sure to spike on this initial news, but will likely level in a few days with this demonstration of force and total annihilation of its nuclear capabilities. They've lost all of their leverage and will likely hit the escape button to a peace deal. Mark Malik, the chief investment officer at Seabrook Financial, said, "I think it's going to be very positive for the stock market, so this will be assuring, especially since it seems like a one-and-done situation. And no, as if the U.S. is seeking a long, drawn-out conflict, the biggest risk is still out there is a Strait of Hormuz. It could certainly change everything if Iran has a capacity to close it." And now Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, a frequent foe of the president, says the strikes on Iran are unconstitutional. Members of the Congress from both chambers and both parties earlier this week sought to rein in President Trump before any strike, saying he must receive congressional approval for any moves against Iran's nuclear facilities. More reactions are pouring in from lawmakers over President Trump's decision to attack Iran. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham is applauding the decision on social media. Graham says it was the right call and that the Iranian regime deserved it. Several Republicans are making similar posts, as well as Democratic Senator John Fetterman, who on social media denounced Iran as the world's leading sponsor of terrorism. Meanwhile, in the lower chamber, Democratic Congressman Jim Himes is condemning the attack. Senator Majority Leader John Thune also took to social media saying Iran has ejected all diplomatic pathways to peace and stand with President Trump on his decision. And New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is calling for President Trump's impeachment, calling the president's decision to bomb without authorization a grave violation of the Constitution and congressional war powers, risking a potential war. And House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries was among dozens of lawmakers taking to social media to criticize the Trump administration. In a statement to X, he says Donald Trump promised to bring peace to the Middle East. He has failed to deliver on that promise. The reek of war has now dramatically increased, and I pray for the safety of our troops in the region who have been put in harm's way. He goes on to say President Trump misled the country about his intentions, failed to seek congressional authorization for the use of military forces, and risk American entanglement in a potential disastrous war in the Middle East. In the meantime, California Governor Gavin Newsom says his state is actively monitoring for any potential impacts following the U.S. bombing in Ukraine. In a post online, Newsom says there are no credible threats at this time, but he urges residents to stay vigilant and report suspicious activity. The New York Police Department issued a similar statement announcing the deployment of additional resources to religious, cultural, and diplomatic sites across the city in coordination with federal partners. And we're also hearing from Congressman Vince Fong, who issued a statement earlier tonight in response to the strikes. He says President Trump's decisive action to eliminate the nuclear capabilities posed by the Iranian regime was a necessary one to prevent a real and catastrophic threat. Iran can never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. We're grateful for the bravery of the U.S. Air Forces and all our military personnel. May God protect them and all Americans in harm's way as we continue the necessary work to preserve peace and stability. And tonight, our sister station in Las Vegas spoke with a political science professor at U.S. Merced for his take on the war in the Middle East. Here's what he had to say.
The choice by the administration, I think, was at least in part a function of reading both the way that things had gone in the early, in Israel's actions from a military standpoint, and also looking a little bit at what was going on in Congress, right? So, there was, certainly the administration was taking the temperature a bit of what their coalition, was going to, say about this. Now, did that ultimately dictate that they should take action? No, probably not as much as the fact that Israel was having some success and that they felt like this had gone strategically well. And so, there's a momentum that the administration probably saw as an opportunity, to get on board with something that perhaps they saw as beneficial in the international scene, certainly not without costs.
Monroe believes that as the war in the Middle East continues, more Americans will begin shifting their views on how the United States is handling the conflict.